Okay, welcome to our latest live interviews, and this one is with Gary Tompsett. So thank you very much, Gary, for being willing to join us tonight. And if you are with us live, and I think there's a few people who are already straight on, if you've got any questions or comments or anything that you wanted to ask Gary, then bring those in and we'll ask him as we go along. I've got a number of photos that Gary sent me, and we're going to talk through some of those to get a sense of what you've been doing and what you're about. But just as we get going, maybe you can just tell us, Gary, what it's like for you at this time in this, we're into week 6 of this lockdown. So just give us a bit of a sense of what it's like in your world, please.
You've given me more of a sense of it there by telling me it's 6 weeks. It's one thing I haven't been doing. I haven't been counting. So I've got a family, a wife and 2 daughters. We're fine. We actually had, early on, we had 14 days of quarantine, self-quarantine. So that was not leaving the house for 14 days because there was a high temperature amongst us. No issues, but it was a good start to the whole process because we had to make that fun, being locked in for 14 days. And early on, there was maybe a dark period of deep thinking. But I got hold of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you know that, and I reorganized it so that financial concerns were the least on my mind. And I had foundations of family sanity and health and well-being. And in that path, I had, how can I help with the fight back? So there's some things I'm doing with that. I'm involved in 2 projects to help the NHS. One is a ventilator project and another is another PPE project. So I formed 2 teams to work on that. So that's kept me busy.
Yeah.
Amongst other things. So, and I've had people that know me know that I own a Land Rover. So I've been busy fixing things on that.
Okay.
And some household DIY.
Excellent. Good. Well, we've met a few times, Gary. I went on one of your navigation courses a couple of years ago and really enjoyed that. And then I've met you at the Dragon's Back, where I know you're very much involved as well. But so they're the things I know about you, and I'm sure there'll be others who will know more than me. But just give us a little bit of a sense of some of the things that you're involved in, and then we'll maybe talk about some of them in a bit more detail. But just give us a bit of a sense of your background and your experience, please.
Okay, background briefly. So 10 years an engineer, 10 years a surveyor in archaeology. Land and buildings, 10 years plus, maybe it's 15 now, in the events industry. So my background is maybe there doesn't seem to be a relationship between those 3 things. I started as an apprentice toolmaker, and then through those other roles, it got me more and more into the outdoors, although I was always doing sport, running and biking as a theme through my life. But I do think there's a relationship between them all, which is about precision and how to do things accurately or present things accurately through engineering, archaeology and event work. So that's my whole background, let's say.
Yeah.
And then my role in events was initially started with some, how would I say, I got myself involved in some major events by just stepping up to the organisers and saying, your event looks so fantastic, how can I get involved? Like a lot of volunteers do and a lot of enthusiasts do. They see something they like the look of and they get involved. So they've got a lot of energy to offer then. And then that led me to one event company as it formed, which was Rat Race Events. It started with a slightly different name, Detail Events, but it quickly became Rat Race Events, and that has grown to a great extent. And I was their event manager, and then I decided to go freelance consultant. which meant I could serve other event organisers, and most notably Shane Oley's AREA events. I've worked on other different organisers' events, but they're the two main companies I've mentioned.
Yeah.
And the freelance side has meant I've been allowed to get involved in other organisers' work rather than just one company. Right. And it's been enlightening to see how others work.
Yeah, great. Well, let's give a little bit of a sense of your background then. And just to let people know, if you've got questions for Gary, or you just want to leave a comment to say that you're watching, that would be very nice, so that we know that we're not on our own here. There's quite a few people that are starting to watch, so that's good. And there'll be others that will probably watch it tomorrow when it's uploaded. Just for a little quiz question, the picture behind me, if anyone can identify where that is, it was on a recce run that I did a few years ago, so you could let me know. That would be fun. And we've got some photos that you gave us, Gary, which I thought would be really good, just to sort of just to get a sense of some of the things that you've done. I say, because I've only met you in the last couple of years as been involved in the Dragon's Back in particular. So it'd be nice to sort of get to know some of the things that you've done. So the first picture I've got here is not that one, that's the wrong one. Is a finish line. I'll put it over there so we can see it. And this is you jumping in the air at a rat race finish. Now, is this one that you did, or one that you were involved in as an organizer?
So that'll be the wall. That's the finish line of an ultra run that starts in Carlisle, finishes in Gateshead, just over the river from Newcastle.
Okay.
So yeah, typically that was an event that I'm often the ground handler, the kind of the consultant that looks at the stakeholders, landowners and councils and so on. So I worked with Rat Race to set that event up as a route, as a design, and the finish is there. And typically what I do is I work deeply at the event early on, and then I step back year after year, and I work back on the event in a kind of different role. So sometimes I'm the slightly directorial, but not often. I'm often just on the safety side or the waymarking side, and for Shane's events, AREA events, planning checkpoints and so on. And that picture just represents that kind of finish line. That had an automatic camera. So whenever anyone ran across the finish line, it triggered the camera. Okay. So that event goes right through the night. As an ultra run at 69 miles. So runners are finishing from tea time all the way through till breakfast. So we've got a finish team, and I was the night director. So to keep morale up, you may entertain yourselves or others. And it kind of, the picture represents how you keep them awake and their morale and their team up, their team kind of skills, as it were, as a group, how they work together. And we all took turns running through the camera, getting automatic shots. And those automatic shots all went through to the commercial photo provider. So as well as having runners coming through the finish line, they ended up with all of these comedy shots. Okay, I think it's the group that had to stay up through the night. That was good for them. Yeah,
I think it's great how each race has its own sort of feel about it, doesn't it? You know, there's different races, and the finish line, it's a very special place, isn't it? You know, I think the emotion of seeing runners finish, whether they're winning a race or they're right at the back of the field or whatever they are, for a lot of people, it's a major accomplishment, isn't it, to be able to finish these big events. And I think to be a race director and to be someone who's helping people, I'm sure you've seen quite a lot of different emotions, haven't you?
Certainly. That point there at the finish line is quite an acute moment of observation and care, because although you might know of medical issues through the course of an event, and you might have your eye on certain individuals or through certain hours or weathers, when people cross the finish line, that is a kind of moment where their guard changes, and it's where they may eventually present some issues of an injury or a medical nature. So within just a couple of minutes, you have to be observant and caring and know what to say and how to handle them as you then pass them on through food and water, and sometimes things relate to equipment, but also getting in the warm and presenting them to the medics if they wish it. And if they don't, keeping an eye if you think that they're struggling with something, and that might happen over the next hour or so. Yeah. After a 69-mile run where someone's been awake, well, you'll know, John, when someone's been awake for 24 plus hours, chemically, what's happened to you?
Yeah. Great, thank you. We'll bring out the next photo in a while, because we've got a question here. First of all, we've got a comment from Gillian McCall, who says, "Hi Gary, nice to see you." I assume she's someone that you know. And then,
hello, Jill.
Yeah, and then we've got...
what Jill will be interested to know that I haven't brought my whistle along with me tonight.
Right. Is that an in-joke, is it?
Oh, very much so. Yeah.
And we've got Stuart Smith saying there, "You look smashing in your groovy shirt." He's very impressed with your shirt.
I would have been so disappointed if Stuart had not been online live tonight. This shirt is a Rip Curl shirt from Cornwall, caused by one of the events I deal with. And mentioning the Cape Wrath Ultra earlier, John, that's interesting in that's the most northwesterly tip of the UK, and I also deal with an event at Land's End, right. the other end. So I guess it's taken me 10 years or so to get to that point, to realise that I have literally dealt with events at both far corners of the UK.
Yeah. And Gillian just comes back and says, "I was going to ask how many whistles you owned." But we got a question here from Michael Jones, and this is, he says, "As a relatively new event organizer myself, what advice would you give to someone who wants to create truly international events?" Now, I'm assuming this is the Michael Jones who is involved in the Snowdon races. So what advice would you give to him?
Well, thanks for the question, Michael. And I wish you great things with your events. You've had a noticeably, the start to your realm is noticeable. I would actually like to take a leaf out of Shane Oley's book, although I don't think he ever says this. What I would say and actually the managing director of Rat Race is Jim Mee. What I would say is a quality they both share is they are brave. And it's that clear. If you want to go high with your event, impact, effect on participants and the media, you've got to be brave.
Okay, good. And if Michael wants to come back, then feel free. That would be good. Thanks for that question. We've also got another comment from Stuart Smith. He wants to know whether you want to borrow a hat.
There is a... Yeah. Do I want to borrow a hat? I'm not sure I would want to borrow one of Stuart's hats.
Yes, that's true.
They may not be quite my taste.
No. Okay, the next photo we've got is one I was really interested to find out more about. And this is you with Ranulph Fiennes. So just tell us a little bit about the background of this photo, please.
Oh, okay. So there are two two event episodes with Ranulph Fiennes, and he was handed to me by a friend who had been asked to partner him in a mountain marathon. Pretty much unbeknown to me, Sir Ranulph Fiennes had 3 or 4 terrible results in mountain marathons, and it had escaped my attention, and I had done probably 40 or 50 mountain marathons, and the 2-day mountain marathons, like the Kim became the Om and the Saunders, and then Shane's mountain marathons, that whole set. So my friend couldn't make it and said, and I just got this call out of the blue, Gary, I can't make this event, and I said I would do it with him. Would you mind partnering Sir Ranulph Fiennes in a mountain marathon? And there was no feasible way you could say no to that. So it actually led to one event and then the second event, because in the first event we did not win the vets. So although I was younger, the vets is based on a cumulative age. Okay. And I can't remember the ages, but he was maybe 60 and I was maybe 39. And we didn't have enough vets handicap to win the vets. We were second. So that meant, because he is very competitive, he said, we'll have to do another one. So the next year we did the Kim again, and we won the vets. And both times we were about 12th in the elite. So he's very, very strong, and he just needed a navigator.
Right. Yeah.
So that was my role.
Yeah. So is he someone that 'cause obviously I've read some of his books and seen some of the things that he's done. Is he just one of those larger than life characters that just has got a big capacity for life and adventure?
Well, we don't have enough time to answer that in full, because I spent some other time with him on some other adventures, and I learned more about him. I wouldn't say that he's larger than life. I would just say that by the nature of how he is driven, his exploits reach lots of people. But actually, it just comes down to the fact that he is precisely driven, and that is also his form of income. He has to have an adventure to then take that adventure on the road with books and illustrated talks. It is his livelihood. Yeah. So it's almost like a survival instinct with him.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you very much. And then the next picture we've got is you with Gary. You're Gary. with James, and you've got your arms in the air. I assume you're coming to the end of an event.
So do you know James, John?
I don't think so. James, what's his surname? What's his surname?
James Slaughter.
No, not met him, I don't think.
No. So, that was just obviously one of those happy kind of finishing moments. That was the GB Ultra Race Across Scotland.
Okay, yeah.
It may have been called Race Across Britain for a while, but eventually they repackaged it as Running the Southern Upland Way.
Yeah.
And it's memorable for me, not because it was another event, another ultra run, because I wasn't really an ultra runner. I've done mountain marathons with navigation, and I've done lots of mountain running challenges, but the penny dropped that despite me planning and organising ultra races, I hadn't actually done one. And I felt a bit guilty. So I thought, in order for me to be empathetic, I'd have to do one.
Okay.
So I chose that one because it wasn't the spine, which is the hardest, but it was kind of pretty hard looking. It was 215 miles non-stop.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the Southern Upland Way is quite a problematic trail.
Mm.
So I just did that, and depending on what pictures you show, there was an event that I had to do. Because I had no ultra running pedigree, I had to show that I could run a fair distance. So I needed a kind of vetting gate.
Yeah.
And I did the Cheviot Goat.
Right.
So it was all fine. And the other strong memory was for the latter half of that event, I found myself with a equally paced, equally receptive to my chat and talking about interesting subjects, and that's James Slaughter,
right,
who has done the Cape Wrath Ultra and the Dragon's Back race.
Yeah,
and we had he made the event twice as enjoyable for me. And he appeared. I think I had an accident during the event where I crushed my toes with a big gate that came off of a rock.
Oh, wow.
And it was at that point that happened. I think my screams could have been heard. I think I heard my own screams echoing back across the glen. But that happened, and I thought, this is the problem. This is my problem of the event. This is, if I just solve this problem, it's fine. There can't be a worse problem than this.
Yeah.
So I was in a lot of pain, and I finished the event fine. So, and then James met up, and we ran across Scotland.
Excellent. And have you done any other ultras since that one then?
I doubt it. I've probably, some of the runs I go on are quite long, and they don't have a boundary as such. I'll run, not necessarily without a plan, but I don't normally have to concern myself with how far I'm going to end up running. I don't measure things quite in that way.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time when I'm working with events and reconnaissance and planning, the pace isn't grueling. It's just a long day and sometimes into the night, and it doesn't really bother me.
Yeah.
As long as you've got just enough food in your rucksack, then it'll be fine.
Excellent. Okay. Before we go to the next photo, we've got a question from Stuart Smith, and he says, please can you give the layman an insight into wrangling? Am I wrangling now as I look into the distance through any window?
So to give credit to the term, Shane Oley, I believe, invented the term wrangling.
Okay.
Because there was an in-joke that sometimes when an event was live, like the Dragon's Back race or the Cape Wrath Ultra, I'd done all of this very deep work before the event. But when I'm at the event, people didn't really know quite what I did.
Right.
Why was I there? Well, I knew why I was there. I was there to ensure that the course worked. Okay. So, and I'm dealing with, for those events, for the bigger events, I'm dealing with maybe 50 stakeholders, some of whom I've got to know personally. So, and jokes there that I know their name, the registration plate of their car and their dog's name, but I know all of that, and I want the event to pass through seamlessly. And there may be issues of access or waymarking or operations, forestry, farming. So eventually the term wrangling came up. And I think it's in the film industry as well, where someone has just got to be ahead of the game to make sure that what is about to happen will work. So wrangling has then developed. You still listening, Stuart?
I am. It's good.
Has then developed. It's all of these magical things that are rather unusual that you might need to do to get the event to come through the countryside correctly.
Okay.
Waymarking is basic compared to some of the magical things that people like myself and people in my team have had to fix, sometimes urgently. We've had things to do with fences, cattle, horses horses stuck in a lane. They've had to wrangle the horses out of the lane and into the field. And it's just keeping a good eye on everything so that the participants' experience just flows.
Yeah, it's interesting that, because obviously I did the Dragon's Back last year, and it just happened, and I was aware that people like yourself were doing a lot of preparation work, and then I helped out at the Skyline races last September, and I was at one point where it was quite a sensitive bit of ground. And I was chatting with a guy there, and it was a lot of work had been put in to make sure that the course went over the part of the ground that wasn't going to churn up and erode the land. So as a runner, you just right, this is the way you're told to go. But often there's a real reason why we have to go that way, isn't there?
Yes, and I imagine which run did you do, John?
With the Skyline? It was the ultra. So I was at a point before they went up to the very highest top. So it was about 4 to 5 hours into the race.
Mm-hmm. So I know exactly where you are, and I know who you met.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So ecologically, that's an area where we have to do the right thing. So it goes back to, in a way, my time in engineering and archaeology and events. To solve some of these most sensitive ecological issues, you have to apply some science and some experts, and you have to be very, very observant to the ground. And then you put in mitigation measures, and then we have to somehow influence the runners to do the right thing. And occasionally we add in education. So a bit of management, but also if we tell runners a bit more about why this is as it is, then they can take that learning away. And in Shane's events, they produce ecological briefing notes. And the whole point of that is if we can help people understand the terrain that they're running in, then they can apply that elsewhere, not an event, but just when they're out in the countryside, they can understand some of the makeup of the ground.
Yeah. Yeah.
And actually, sometimes people think of the most obvious matters like eagles or lambing and so on, like wildlife. But some of the most sensitive issues is actually the flora in some areas of the ground, and not just sites of special scientific interest, but there's some levels that have even higher protection, and it's invisible to the likes of you and I. But if we bring in experts, we know what we need to avoid. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. That was a good answer. Stuart Robinson saying, "Hi Gary, haven't seen you for ages." And then his question is, have you ever competed in any races outside the UK? Any races outside the UK?
Oh, okay. Hello, Stuart. Thank you for the question. So, right. So I'm 50% runner, 50% mountain biker. And that is fairly unchanged since the age of about when I stopped drinking. So from the age of about 20, I've enjoyed those two disciplines, and definitely mountain biking, and running definitely mountains. So the mountain biking is really what has taken me abroad. And I actually miss not having done some of these fantastic ultra runs that are abroad in fantastic terrains, be it deserts or ice or Mediterranean runs, Gran Canaria and so on. I would like to do those. But what's taken me abroad has been when I was a mountain bike racer and endurance. So the quick answer to where have I been with those? The best mountain bike long orienteering races, some of which are up to 18 hours long, the Czech Republic. And then mountain biking orienteering, I've taken part in the European Championships and the World Championships. So the European Championships were in France, and the World Championships that I did were in Australia. And I was on the British team, and I posted some good results. And it was all very, very exciting.
Yeah.
And running-wise, though, I don't think I've actually done runs abroad. Makes me feel a bit limited. But I have done some adventure races, which is a side I haven't spoken of. So multi-sport, run, trek, bike, rope work, kayaking, bring that all together. And a memorable one was, I hope you like this answer, Stuart, was Red Bull Dolomitan Man. So in the Italian Dolomites, Austrian Dolomites, a town called Lienz, and you build a team, and it's a famous event partly because it didn't allow women to take part for many years, and it has in your team the runner runs 5,000 feet to a summit and tags a relay, a paraglider then flies back down to the valley, tags a kayaker, who then paddles a white water section, tags a mountain biker, which was me, who mountain bikes to the summit of the mountain 5,000 feet, and then descends all of the ski black runs in summer to finish. So going abroad, and we were invited by Red Bull to form a team. So going abroad to do an event like that was memorable. Yeah,
I've just put the photo on that you sent me. It's in black and white at the top of the hill in a mountain bike race. Do you remember which one that was?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
So that's cyclocross racing, drop handlebars.
Yeah.
And it's a fertile scene in Scotland and the north of England. Maybe someone would say the south of England. It's a growing scene. So despite the long endurance races, I also enjoy some explosive events. So some orienteering is quite explosive, I would say, physically. Cyclocross definitely is. They're always less than 1 hour long, and they have lots of steep and technical problems. So that's a cyclocross race near Glasgow. I do plenty of those every winter. Some mountain bike events, but I think it just represents that variety of sport that I am lucky enough to enjoy still. Yeah,
excellent. I didn't realise you would. I knew you'd done some cycling, but I didn't realise just how much that was. Okay, we've got a question from Andy Simo. He said, when was the last time you were positionally embarrassed?
Positionally?
Yeah, so I would imagine he's thinking, when were you last lost on a mountain?
Sounds almost rude, Simo. Okay. So I would say not in the last 25 years. So I suffer a particular problem, which is that I have never DNF'd. And I've done hundreds of events, except I have when I've been paired with somebody else.
Okay.
And they've had a difficulty. So the last time, and it's happened twice. Well, in an event term, it's happened once in an event in my lifetime, and it's happened once in a challenge. I do lots of like FKT, personal challenges. There's a bunch of records out there with like the Ramsey Round in winter, or mountain bike challenges, the up lengths of countries. But to answer the question, it's interesting that you say embarrassed. Oh, did you say embarrassed? Did Andy say embarrassed?
Yes. Yeah. When was the last time you were positionally embarrassed?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. So I would never be embarrassed because although I have an ego, my ego wouldn't allow me to be embarrassed. I might be slightly annoyed. Maybe that's the same thing, eh?
Okay. Well, we've actually...
But over 25 years ago, I was doing a mountain marathon with a friend, and winter banged into this mountainous environment, and eventually it was so fierce on us and his face, he couldn't see. It was unsafe to continue. And that's my only DNF.
Right. Okay.
So I got him off the mountain and to safety.
Yeah. And Andy's come back and said it was a euphemism for being lost. Yeah. And we've got a comment from Stuart Smith. He said, I know. Gary was dancing in a bar on a Sunday night in Arran.
Did he say bouncing?
No, dancing.
Oh, dancing.
Yeah.
We were all dancing. Lost. Yeah, I do. So look, I do get lost occasionally. And what I enjoy in that moment, even more so in these days, we can be in so much control. If you think of the devices that we can be using, the quality of the maps, our training and confidence, we really more and more are becoming more readily in control of everything we're doing. So what I like about getting lost is it really does shake you. And as soon as it happens, I relish it. I think this is an unusual situation.
Yeah.
How am I going to get out of this? So relocating yourself. But in terms of embarrassment, and in many events now, you might be carrying a tracker, so someone else can share your embarrassment or see you get lost. But it's much more complex than that, because when you get lost, you don't know you're getting lost for quite a while, and then getting out of being lost and relocating yourself is the beauty of the cerebral challenge that you're then faced with. Yeah. So I don't think I've ever been embarrassed. I think it's more I relish the situation and how to fix it. Okay,
we've got a comment from Mick Brown. He's saying, is that Crib Goch in the background? Not really sure. A wild guess. No. Your answer's no. It's not. It's not in Wales. The photo behind me. So you can someone else can have a guess. I wanted to talk a little bit about the sort of navigation side and the course planning. I find this fascinating. And there's a picture here that you sent me with you with a pencil, and you're obviously working out a route. So just tell us a little bit about what goes into planning. I think the two races I was particularly interested in is the Dragon's Back, one that I did last year, and Cape Wrath, which I hope to do. I was going to hope to do it next year, but now everything's been put back a year. So I was going to be on the team next year with the idea of doing the year after. So just tell us a little bit about what it's involved in planning a route, particularly at Dragon's Back, Cape Wrath, please.
Well, this is a big subject area, so I've got to be careful here to answer in brief. So let's say there's three types of events. There's the ones you've just mentioned, which are linear ultra runs. Another type, and they're not waymarked on the ground. They may have some checkpoints where you meet people. And most ultra runs are like that, maybe. More so now that GPX following on a watch is more commonplace. Another type of event are those where it's fully waymarked on the ground. And that is a realm that's popular for a slightly different type of clientele, arguably, but equally valid. And as you know, even audacious mountain runs like the Salomon Skyline Scotland events, they are waymarked on the ground, even though they go into quite difficult ridge and mountain environments. And then the third type event I don't know if you've done one, John, which is the navigational mountain marathon, where you have a matrix of dispersed checkpoints that you've got to connect in a particular order, that you can.
Yeah, I think the closest I've come is the Great Lakeland 3-day.
Yeah,
yeah, which I loved. That idea of working out your own route. Yeah,
yeah. So the Great Lakeland 3-day is a bridging event between the purely navigational matrix of dispersed checkpoints and a kind of ultra run where you're following good trails in the main. The GL3D is planned so that you can pick up trails and connect it all together.
Yeah.
But your question is, how do you plan these things? One clue earlier was about flow. That what you're trying to achieve is with the linear journeys, the long ultras, you're trying to achieve a route that the participants can. We're not trying to trick the participants. We're not trying to make it even more difficult. The difficulty is the nature of the terrain, the length of the trail, the ascent in the trail, the impact of the weather. So nutrition and camping, and so we don't need to add any complexity with navigational difficulty. So we're looking for picking up on nice runnable trails, navigational handrails, being in the track in the glen, guiding people along the edge of the fence before they cross at the stile, being on the ridge or being in a safe place. And the stakeholders concur with you that is a good way to go. And sometimes we take routes that are not recognised as public rights of way, let's say, but that the landowner says, if you could go this way, it would be of great help to me, because then you avoid my working practices or my farmyards or whatever. So it's always a good mix of flow, known access, navigational, easing the navigational load on people. And I will have missed a number of other points there in how to do a good job on that. The mountain marathons are different though, John. The mountain marathons are almost entirely there for navigational challenge. Through different scales, the hardest through to the easiest. The challenge, it will be greatest with the elite and easiest with the B, C classes.
Yeah. No, that's really helpful. Thank you. And we just got a couple of photos, and then I've got some quickfire questions which I'd like to ask you. But this first one is Glencoe. And it just shows you that you sometimes get the glamorous jobs, because this one is you pulling a portaloo. Do you remember that? I think that's the checkpoint, isn't it, on the A82 before they head up to the Anakinna Ridge.
Yeah. So at that location, that is a very, very what should I say? Telling spot, because a number of people will get cut off at that checkpoint. And that is about 2/3 of the way round the Glencoe skyline. Very challenging run involving scrambling. So when people get to that checkpoint, it's busy. We've got all sorts of food support. It's one of AREA events, Shane Oley's events of Skyline Scotland. I know it well. I do the groundwork, and then I get a job in the event. And just happens to have been to be at that location. And actually, I tend to stand back a bit and just see that things are going well. The people that do all the hard work are particularly the volunteers that are running that location. There's a few professional staff to do with safety, many of whom are on the hill. Some are at the location. But even in that event, the medical team are volunteers. So that is a place where there's a lot of focus, a lot of the sponsors are there, a lot of the supporters are there. And that's just another example of a fun shot, really, because there was a problem in how do you move toilets. So that's how you move toilets.
Yeah.
You get a haulage strap, you put it underneath, and you drag it along the ground.
Yeah, I must have.
What you don't realise, though, John, if I may say,
Yep.
and this is the maximum fun that I can't show in photography, but there's someone sat inside that toilet.
Yeah, I think I was there actually, because it was the year my friend was doing it, and he was going to be right on the edge of that checkpoint. And in fact, he was about 20 minutes early, so he did really well. But I remember watching you having to close that checkpoint at 3 o'clock, and there was two guys that had literally bust themselves to try and get down in time. And that was hard, wasn't it? You know, it must be difficult to have to say, but I must admit, I thought you did it very graciously, and you know, that they accepted that they'd missed out. But it's a tough job, isn't it, to tell someone who has worked so hard to get that far round.
You get some, you're right, and you get some evidence of that with some of the videos, movies from events. You've seen it maybe at the Barclay, you've seen it on some other British events, and particularly Cape Wrath Ultra, and the Dragon's Back race is the kind of sharpest version of that, because it's a bit more punchy. And not unfortunately, but thankfully maybe, some of those moments, not much of that gets into the movie because it's a little bit too personal. And there's a lot more going on that's quite upsetting when people are, they don't believe you that they've missed the cutoff.
Yeah. And
to the second, we make the cut. And it is not something that we like the volunteers to handle, because it might involve a little bit of a confrontation, and then a negotiation, not a negotiation, but then a kind of bringing the person down to ground a bit more carefully. So normally a member of professional staff handles those cut-offs.
Yeah, and there has to be a line somewhere, doesn't there? You know, otherwise people will be out there forever. Yeah. Well, that's given us a real insight into some of the things that you do and some of the things that you've been involved in. I know we could talk a lot more about different things, but thank you so much. But I've just got 5 quick fire questions in a sense to finish with. That was all right, and that'll just give us to get the benefit of your experience. Now, you can either have your cycling, your events, or whatever you want on these ones. But the first question was, what's the best piece of advice that you've been given that has made a difference to some of the things that you've done?
Okay. Now, I can't remember whether I read this or whether it was spoken to me, or under what circumstances I was being advised. I just can't remember, but I liked it. And it relates to when it's really tough. As a participant, really, I wouldn't say this applies to other event work, but just as a participant. And it was, when it's really tough, you just need to think of all of the reasons not to give up.
Right. Okay. Excellent. I'll add that to my list of good advice. Second question: what is your favourite piece of kit? Have you got a favourite piece of kit?
So I haven't read. So John sent me these questions. I deliberately did not read them.
Okay.
I would say an iPhone.
Okay. Yeah.
It does everything and more.
Yeah. Yeah. It has been a real game changer. You were saying earlier about navigation. For someone like myself, I love using a map and compass, but I must admit I'm relying more on, I find OS Maps on my iPhone is just brilliant. You know, you can put the route and it'll show you where you are. It really does help, doesn't it?
Well, I think that you need to. You had James Thurlow on and open tracking and the benefits that has brought to the events world.
Yeah.
Martin Stone and Sport Ident, the benefits that has brought.
Yeah.
Technology and media coverage and just technology. So smartphones are in the same area.
Yeah.
I think it's important to use the technology. And although there's a lot to be said for a paper map because the batteries won't run out, it can still blow away in the wind. It can still fall apart if you've not looked after it, So to have layers of this stuff. And the most important thing, I think, with a smartphone is that it has a cursor in an app that shows you where you are.
Yeah.
And although that's obvious stating just that alone, what it means is that if you use that cursor in good mapping, you can use that to help you learn how to navigate and take that away into your paper mapping world.
Yeah.
So I think it's been an important advance.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that the app OS Locate is brilliant, isn't it? Do you have that one? And it'll give you an 8-figure grid reference of exactly where you are.
I think it gives you a 6-figure, not an 8.
Right. Okay.
So there's better apps than OS Locate.
Oh, is that? Okay. I thought it was 8. 6 is it? Okay. But 6 is good enough for most of us, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
It is true.
Yeah.
I was thinking of when we're setting checkpoints, we double check using technology as well.
Okay.
Is that a giveaway?
No.
But we use all the materials to hand, so we like to have a choice of apps.
Yeah.
So you sometimes cross-reference them because they can occasionally be in error.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. Third question. What is your go-to food in a long event? Have you got a particular food that you really know that you can stomach and helps you get through a tough time?
I can eat anything. So
okay.
savoury, sweet, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Energy bars, any energy bar. I would say my answer would be any energy bars. They're in a wrapper. That's helpful. Might sound obvious, but if it's a really fast race environment, I pre-open the wrappers so that I just squeeze them out of the bar, out of the wrapper. I open the ends. I'm not a particular fan of gels. Although I like the taste of them, I find that in management terms, if you think of adventure races and longer affairs, they can burst, and then it's just a mess.
Yeah.
So I'm a fan of energy bars, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And question 4: if you could do only one more event, which one would it be? It could be one you haven't done yet, or one that you've done before that you would love to do again.
As a participant, John?
Yes, I'm thinking more as a participant, yeah.
I've obviously witnessed a lot of events and I've taken part in many, and sometimes I single out an event that I'm only going to do once, which means I'm going to do it well. So the GB Ultra running 215 miles non-stop, there was no way that was always going to be fine.
Yeah.
There's no way I was not going to complete that. So I only need to do it once.
Yeah.
I did a mountain bike event, the Mac Avalanche. It's like a downhill off of a mountain in Scotland in a ski resort, and you do two seeding runs, and then you do a final mass start on snow. And people are preoccupied with crashing and bike breakages, and so that was another example of I'll just do that well, I'll prepare, and then I won't need to do it again.
Yeah.
Which has been true. But then equally, sometimes in life, there's an event that you love so much, you would gladly do it again and again and again. And I don't really know why that is. I can't separate the two.
Right.
As for what event would I do, I would say I would like to do an event that doesn't yet exist. It's not on my radar.
Okay.
And when it's on my radar, I'll know what it is and I'll have to do it.
Okay, excellent. And then the last question I've got is, do you have a mantra to keep you going when things get tough? Something that mentally that helps you to get through a difficult stage?
Oh, I think I would go back to that advice that I was given, John. To think of all of the reasons not to give up.
Yeah.
And just so obviously what that's meant to mean is that if you're having a difficulty, an injury, I know some injuries can obviously be very limiting and foolish to continue on. But if you've got something that's hurting or worrying you, then you've got to quickly transform into what are the positives of this situation. So the reasons why you can work forwards and not think of the negatives.
Yeah.
To believe that it's just a phase, it's just a moment, and that the future is where your strength is on the route or with the difficult event.
Yeah.
And literally mantra. There is a chant I run in my head sometimes, which is slightly rhythmical as a mantra, which is a rhythmical sounding, double worded hill in the Lake District that I run through my head when I'm running.
Okay.
And I can do that for quite a while.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, some great advice there. Thank you very much. It's coming up to 8 o'clock. I've tried to make sure I finish by 8 o'clock on a Thursday so that we can get outside and applaud the NHS and the key workers. So it's coming up to 8, so we'll stop there. For those that are still interested in what's behind me, it's Angel Tarn, just above Patterdale. When I did the Northern Traverse route as a recce, I was positionally challenged on that recce run. I got completely disorientated where I was, and I went up and down, and I made a big mess of it on the recce. But that's what recce's are about, aren't they? Because on the day, I was with a couple of other people, and we were fine. We found the way, no problem. Anyway, that's where the picture is behind me. Just want to say thank you so much again, Gary, for joining us tonight. It's been really good, and I look forward to meeting up again when we can, and when we're back on the events. I was supposed to be on the event team for the Cape Wrath this year, I'll do that next year with the idea of doing the race the year after. So I'll see you there. If not, I've volunteered for the Skyline as well. So you're around for that one, aren't you? Yeah. So I'll hopefully see you there if that one's on. But thank you very much for tonight, and thank you for those that have been watching. I've got 2 more interviews next week. Next Tuesday, Karen Nash, and then next Thursday lunchtime, actually, Claire Maxted, who be interesting to chat to her. She normally does the interviews, so I thought it'd be interesting to interview her. So thank you very much. So we'll say good night so we can get out. And again, just thank you very much, Gary, for your time.
Thank you, John. Good night, all.
Night.